This is Steve Wiseman at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Today, in a new series that we're inaugurating of video interviews at the Peterson Institute, our guest is Simeon Djankov, a visiting fellow at the Peterson Institute, who is the author of a new book published by us and available on ebook right now called Inside the Euro Crisis, an Eyewitness Account. It tells his firsthand experience in the years participating in the efforts to stabilize the European crisis. Welcome, Simeon. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Tell us, how first did you get to have this front row seat? What was your job?
I became finance minister of Bulgaria in July 2009 and also deputy prime minister, which then led me to visit Brussels several times a month through the main period of the Euro crisis.
And before that, how much involvement did you have in European economic affairs? You came from the World Bank, where you were involved in looking at other countries' finances.
Yes, quite a bit. I was chief economist for finance at the World Bank prior to my appointment in the Bulgarian government. So as part of that, we were witness to the early stages of the crisis, first starting here, then in Iceland. But it was only when I moved to Bulgaria that we started seeing the events unfolding very, very quickly and into a crisis mode.
Now, you arrived at the moment of high turbulence and crisis, as you just said, but the crisis has stabilized now in 2014. To what do you attribute, what decisions were important in contributing to the success of that stabilization?
It was a long crisis, so most crises do not last 5 or 6 years, so this was one of the longer historical crises in Europe. But there were several important decisions. The major one, the creation of the single bank supervisor, which the decisions were made 2012 when I was also involved. It's starting only late this year, so it's taken a long time for it to actually take place, but a very important decision calmed markets down. The single most important decision we took.
Now, the process was very messy, and there were mistakes along the way, miscalculations. What, in your opinion, were the pivotal ones in that regard?
I think this is the main point of the book that may be interested for a wider audience, not just economists like myself. We've organized the book around 7 pivotal points, 7 tipping points that describe how in any one time of this crisis there were unexpected events that either made things very significantly worse and we had to all scramble and find new answers, or there were a couple of also good tipping points, like Mario Draghi's announcement in July 2012 that he would do whatever it takes to get Europe out of the crisis, and markets believe that. Usually if other people say, I'll do whatever it takes, markets sort of forget it or don't pay much attention. He said it, and markets actually did calm down. This was, I think, the major tipping point for us to be now saying that Europe has stabilized.
And you also assessed, though, another event, which was when President Sarkozy and Chancellor Merkel of Germany, President Sarkozy of France, met and said that in the future there would have to be sacrifices or costs imposed on creditors in future crises. And in your judgment, that was not the wisest move.
No, there were a number of not wise moves during the crisis that are described in this book, many that I witnessed myself, but that was an example where at a very high level the Chancellor of Germany, the President of France, I'm sure with lots and lots of expert advice, met and thought if we make this announcement, markets would calm down. Exactly the opposite happened. Not only markets didn't calm down, but it precipitated the fall of Ireland into a significant crisis and ultimately bankruptcy.
The interesting thing was that it was kind of a roller coaster for you personally. You came to this capacity with a lot of experience looking at other countries, as I mentioned before. But in this case, you watched the situation unfold For you personally, what were the biggest surprises of what you learned during this crisis and the attempts to stabilize it?
The biggest surprises were mostly to do with how ineffectual European leaders were, first in talking about the crisis, what are the ways to resolve it, and then after we had all met and talked, actually coming with completely different solutions. They thought maybe there were better solutions, uncoordinated. So you gave today one signal to the markets, tomorrow a completely different signal to the market. We describe in the text, for example, we worked for over a year to convince the then Prime Minister of Greece, Papandreou, in the need for a second large package, more assistance, financial aid. I remember clearly on one Friday, he agreed to this, and then Saturday we wake up to an announcement in Greece that he wants a referendum because he is not sure. That was among the tipping points here that we say that first infuriated everybody because it was very, very hard work over several months, and it's also the tipping point where markets figured out actually the European leaders don't know what they're talking about.
Well, was this an institutional problem, or was there a failure of leadership that went beyond the institutional to just the personalities of the people involved?
I think both. There was clearly an institutional failure in that in the European Commission, the European Parliament, the European Council, there isn't a clear way to resolve these kind of issues and decide. So there is no voting mechanism to say this is what we do. So clearly European institutions have to evolve more, not just in economic crisis, in any kind of crisis. But I think the other part, the personal part, was that nerves were just very frayed, and people, even top leaders who should be very calm and organized about it, lost their nerve.
Yeah. Now, while this was happening, of course, you were also functioning as Deputy Prime Minister of Bulgaria with your own agenda for reform programs. That was another ordeal for you, and it didn't. How did that end up? Tell us a little bit about that, because that's also in the book and an important part of your own odyssey here.
Indeed, I went to Bulgaria thinking that I would be helping my own country in terms of its budgeting issues, in terms of its healthcare, education, pension reforms, and so on. This was my intention 100%. It turned out that I spent, as all of my colleagues, other finance ministers, most of my time on European matters, keeping the Eurozone together, keeping the European Union together. But in the background was all of these fights in our national parliament with opposition parties, trying to convince people that Bulgaria on its own needs to go through this reform path, so that we are much more immune to this type of crisis, and that's described in the text. This is, if you like, the personal memoirs part of inside the Euro crisis.
Okay, well, thank you, Simeon. And once again, the book is Inside the Euro Crisis, an Eyewitness Account, which we're publishing now, and it's available in ebook format. And Simeon, you're also going to be doing some events in Europe you can tell us about, and then we'll have an event in the fall here at the Institute. Where are you going in Europe?
There's quite a lot of interest in Europe, so from the second half of June we will be presenting it in Vienna, Munich, Berlin, Paris, London, Lisbon. This is the places that were affected by the crisis, so it's natural to have quite a lot of interest.
Okay, and we'll have an event in the fall as well, and look forward to that. Thank you very much, Simeon Djankov.
Thank you, Steve.